I'd like to call the Board of Selectmen Special Budget Workshop meeting for Wednesday, January 23rd, 2019 to order. I'd like to welcome the Board of Finance, longstanding tradition that the Board of Finance participates in the budget presentations over these next two days, this morning and tomorrow morning, where our departments will present their budgets and will provide us with the opportunity to discuss in any amount of detail and question some of the assumptions and the numbers that they've come up with. So, again, thanks to the Board of Finance for taking time out of their schedule. With that, we'll start with, first up is going to be the library. Rob McCool. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now you're a veteran of this, right? Just 2 years now, right? Yeah, easy, right?
Hi, I'd just first like to thank the board members and the friends who made it out this morning. It's really with their support that I'm able to kind of come in with a more humble budget, because our reliance on the friends is really exceptional. I'm familiar with a lot of other organizations throughout the state, and our friends group, I think, is perhaps the most efficient in the state I've ever seen. It's really an operation they're running. It's incredible what they support for us.
I would agree with you.
So I know we're kind of going to dig into the operating budget, but I always like to take a minute to discuss the salary line.
That's fine.
Last year, during the fiscal year, there were some opportunities which came just from the change in leadership, which were a little more profound than in years past, where we're always looking to create efficiencies, but you sort of have to wait for someone to retire. This was a bigger opportunity. So we did manage to cut $15,000 off of the salary line during the course of the previous fiscal year. And I wanted to sort of do that because I didn't see an opportunity to cut in this operating budget. Obviously, my goal at all times is to make the library the best it can be. But on the other hand, I am looking to make cuts wherever possible. So, if I can make a cut, I will. We were able to make some cuts last year. It involved, there was a retirement of a part-time, non-union employee very soon after I took over. We eliminated that position, repurposed some of the hours, restructured some of the other positions. So my just general philosophy is I'm always looking to bolster the professional staff, but I'm willing to make cuts at the bottom to do that. And that's just because of the changing nature of the library, which has become a little more technical in nature, where I need this technical expertise. I can live without a little bit of the old-fashioned help at the bottom, which is still important, but not quite as necessary. And that's an ongoing philosophy. Sandy, I think 3 years prior to that, cut a $10,000 position in a very similar vein, where it was doing sort of menial tasks, which were not quite as essential to the operation. So where I can make a cut, I will. I just don't think the operating budget is where I'm able to do it. Okay. Now, having said that, I think the most interesting thing about this year's budget is what has happened with utilities, thanks to what's going on with Johnson & Controls and the energy efficiency improvements. First off, we were previously paying a surcharge of a little over $11,000 a year for the last round of energy efficiency upgrades, which happened more than 5 years ago. So I'm cutting $11,000 just because we finally stopped paying that monthly surcharge. In addition to that, and this is where I'm a little reluctant to get too optimistic, but I can't help it. When I had to present this to the board in December, I only had 2 months of hard data to look at. Looking at that, I came up with a number of $63,000 for the electric bill. After a couple more months of data, I still think it's going to be even lower than that, but that was sort of a conservative estimate looking at the last 12 months and shaving it down and removing the surcharge. What I'm really curious is how the next couple of months are going to perform in the harsh weather conditions. But I am thinking ultimately the electric bill might be coming in under $50,000. So it's really been exceptional for us. We're a large building. The lighting upgrade alone has been amazing. The insulation, everything has really worked to our favor. So we've seen a drastic reduction in our electric bill, which I'm thrilled with. So that is really the entirety of what's coming. I'm coming in, $10,000 less than I came in last year. That is the reason, completely. So now going to the increases, which are obviously there's a couple. There's a $7,700 increase, which was beyond our control, and that's just because when we asked to purchase a copy machine in the last capital improvements budget, that was rejected, taken off the list. So we were then asked to join the town's plan, which we did. And from that point forward, we essentially just did as we were told. It is a $7,700 a year charge. So that increase is beyond our control. We did go from 2 machines to 1 to try to mitigate that to some degree. I wasn't anticipating Royal Printing closing when we made that decision, so it's been a little tough. But we're making it. It's working. It's fine. But it is a substantial increase. The other increase is a $6,000 increase in electronic materials. And I would like to point out that this is the first time we've come to the town looking for an increase in the typical, it's not materials per se, but it is like what we're offering the public service. In this case, what I'm talking about is our digital circulation. We reduced the materials line during the Great Recession by 91%, or over $21,000. And we've been able to manage, thanks to the Friends, as I mentioned. Now we're sort of in this middle area where circulation has stabilized and is not decreasing. So we reduced the purchase of books somewhat, but we're kind of steady now. DVDs are still steady, but all the use of all the digital services is increasing fairly rapidly. So we've gone from what was like 1 or 2% of our circ 10 years ago when we launched these services, now constitutes 13% of our circulation. Last year was 11, it's 13 now, and it's increasing. I am negotiating with these services all the time. I'm trying to reduce cost. I'm working with our consortium to try to get as many deals by going in collectively as possible. There's one particular service called Hoopla, which is quite expensive. I'm asking for the $6,000 increase largely to mitigate that and to not have to cut anything else. And this includes things like Ancestry.com, the New York Times Historical Database, some things that are not in the circulation numbers, but are widely used both inside and outside the library and remotely. They're extremely popular. They're popular to the point where I've actually had people from Madison come to me asking if they could buy a Guilford Library card. And I said, that's really not how this works, but I'm glad you like our services, but inside the library, everything is free to anyone that walks in, but remotely, we're only able to offer our services to Guilford citizens. And they're quite popular. So the $6,000 increase is essentially for that, to keep that services. Now, in the long run, something's going to have to give. Like either the DVD use will start to plummet and we'll stop purchasing them. Maybe books on CD will be completely replaced by the streaming services. Right now, we're in this middle area where the traditional materials are not decreasing, but we are seeing a rapid increase in the streaming services. So we're kind of stuck where we need both. And then the final increase is a modest increase to the maintenance line once again, and that's again just a 10-year-old building. In this case specifically, we did pay for a professional carpet cleaning out of private funds, and now we've done the whole building. And after having that done once, I really think this needs to be an annual event. And then also that would include and that's not completely covering it, but it's covering most of it. We'll still rely on private funds for part of that. It also just is sort of trying to keep on top of it. So we replace a few carpet tiles here and there, rather than coming at you like in a couple of years with a $30,000, complete carpet replacement. I think some targeted maintenance will stay on top of it. We can put that off quite a bit. So that's essentially where we stand.
Questions? Comments?
I have a general question.
Sure,
A number
Nick.
of departments have talked about electricity savings specifically.
Yep.
Board of Ed, this,
Yep.
I know there are a couple more. Have we factored in the rating? Does that factor in the rate increase that's coming?
Mary Jane?
It does. You'll see a lot of our departments, you might not see that decrease because of the rate increase. Building like the library had substantial work done during the energy performance contract. Town Hall, not as much because we had already done a lot of it prior to that. So you'll see differences from budget to budget, whether it's more status quo or to see some significant decreases as in the library.
But the question.
It
the
is,
answer is
yes,
yes.
yes, yes.
The increase is there.
I don't,
Yeah.
I didn't want to start with this large increase and have you expect that from every department.
And one thing I guess I would point out is there's 3 things involved. There's the lack of the surcharge, which we were paying previously. That's gone. That's $11,000. Then just last January, when we switched providers to only Eversource, we saw some savings there of approximately, just about $1,000 a month. Then the first bill I really had data on was October's, which was looking at September's when the work was done. That was, coming in at $3,000 less after accounting for the surcharge reduction. So that was when we kind of like woke up to this, like, whoa, this is profound. So I am anticipating it to actually be under what I'm hoping for, because some of the work was only just completed. Like just, last weekend, a large chunk of the electric work was finished, which was a substantial amount of the library. So just on the incomplete part of what they did, we were saving $3,000 a month. I think this could be really substantial.
And just as a follow-up on that, there have been some articles in the paper recently that the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority has dragged Eversource back in on that rate increase because of the federal, the drop in the corporate tax rate with the overhaul of the federal tax program. It went from 34 to 23%. So the PURA is looking at an even distribution between shareholders and ratepayers on that drop, which could be substantial to all of us as consumers. So, but yeah, there is some upside capture there. You're right. Anything else, Rob? Rob, terrific job. Thank you very much.
I also just wanted to quickly thank Mitch. This plan to save $15,000 was fairly convoluted, and Mitch worked with me very closely, and I thank you very much for that.
It was. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, Human Services. Slow down. We have time. Well, we're a couple minutes. We're running a couple minutes ahead.
The library is exceptionally efficient in all ways.
Good morning, Pam.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good.
Good morning, everybody.
Take your time. Take yourself, get organized. We're, as you said, we're running a little bit early.
I'm very surprised.
So are we.
All right. I'm always prompt and I always arrive a few minutes early, but
And you did.
wow. I'm impressed. All right. So I'm Pam Ellman. I'm the new chair of the Human Services Council. And I'm assuming everybody has our request this year, and I'm assuming all the numbers match up. And we don't have a little blip like we had last year. So anyway, so our fiscal year 2019-2020 departmental budget request is $89,691. This is $3,000 more than last year's request, which is a 3.46% increase. What I wanted to do just briefly, I know you have a busy morning, is to focus on a few of the agencies that we're requesting funding for, and then see if you have any questions about any of them. The first one I wanted to draw your attention to is Literacy Volunteers. Literacy Volunteers has come to us kind of haphazardly over the past several years, and we were really pleased that they came back this year. They have a new executive director, and I think that's probably the reason why they were really on the ball this year. Christine Homa, she came and did an excellent presentation. And I'm sure you all know what Literacy Volunteers does. And last year, they served 26, in last fiscal year, they served 26 Guilford residents. All their services are 100% free. Their tutors are all volunteers. And the funds that they request from us is simply for their training materials to train additional tutors. We're really glad they came back, and we've authorized basically the same, or not authorized, we've requested the same amount that we requested in prior years. The last year they came to us was 2017, 2018, so there's been quite a gap. So we've requested the same amount because we'd like, although we really appreciate their services, we think they do great work, we'd like to see a little more consistency from them. We want to develop more historical data so that we can hopefully request additional funds for them. So hopefully they'll come back next year. And the second organization I wanted to draw your attention to is the VNA. Everybody knows what the VNA does. They're a huge presence here in Guilford. They're primarily known for their home-based nursing care program. Last fiscal year, 629 Guilford residents received home-based nursing care services from the VNA. They also have a relatively new hospice program. I think this is the second or third year it's been in existence. One other aspect of the VNA that I also wanted to mention that I was unfamiliar with until they came to speak to us is their VNA Community Education Program. This is when they go out into the community and they provide just a variety of services. And as you know, most of their services are, if people have private insurance, great. If they don't, then they accept Medicaid and Medicare. And often people pay sliding scale fees, and often people don't pay any fees at all. Medicaid reimbursements have declined every year, so this has led VNA to have to stretch their dollars. Some of the services they provide to the community that you're probably aware of, the flu clinic. That's a huge benefit, especially for our seniors. Last year, I get the number. I think we had 317 people received flu shots, Guilford residents. They also have a program called the Community Nurses Clinic. This is where they send nurses into the community every month to 4 locations. Here, the community center, Boston Terrace, Satcham's Hollow, and Guilford Court for 3 hours each time every month. And what they do there with the residents is they discuss disease processes, treatment options, nutritional management, physical activity, and medication safety and effectiveness. This is something that I don't think most people even know exists. I didn't know this exists, but they do this every month. They also have just a variety of other things. I'll just name a few. Parkinson's support services, Parkinson's support classes, Dodge Diabetes, a 12-month diabetes prevention class. All these things are offered to the community. So they are a huge part of this town, and we are requesting an increase, of $500 over last year. It's not a lot, but we think it's well worth the investment, and we hope you will agree to it. So before I go on, does anybody have any questions? I could go on and talk about all these agencies, but I know you're obviously pressed for time.
No, we've got a little bit of time. And I think it's important that the community understand where some of these dollars are going, so, and,
Sure.
and the services and the benefits to Guilford residents, so.
Could you
Please.
speak to, in reference to other agencies, Women and Family Life? I mean, it represents the biggest increase, over 60% of your total increase, so what are the changes there? I read the backup, so.
You read, right. Well, that's actually the next agency I was going to talk about, so I'm glad you brought that up. Women and Family Life has one of the reasons, yes, that we have increased the dollar amount to them from last year, over $2,000 increase. You've probably seen their brochures, and their brochures talk about the different services they provide, the legal services, the financial services, Girls Run, Girls Coach, which is directed to high school, middle school, and elementary school girls. But what they also have more internally that I don't think people realize is the Guided Assistance Program. The Guided Assistance Program is basically a method of networking people with all the different services they may need, whether it be financial, legal, divorce, marital, abuse, mental health. All of those things they can connect somebody to. They don't just give you if you come in with one concern, they give you that one resource and then you're done. They help you with everything you could possibly need. And it's men and women. Despite the title, it's men and women. And so the Guided Assistance Program is run by a full-time LCSW, Emily Steinagel. That's what she does. And the program has become so successful, and that's because they do a great job, but also because the need is there. They are looking to hire another part-time, a second person to help administer the program, a part-time LCSW. So that is really that's not really a new program. It's been going on for a few years, but it's really come into, it's really flowered, is the way I'd put it. It's really, really become a very strong and successful program. That is the main, that is really what, when they come to talk to us, that's really what they emphasize. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. And those are the three I wanted to discuss. I can obviously discuss any of the other ones if you'd like, but I also just want to see if you have any specific questions I can answer.
I'd just like to make a comment. In the past 2 weeks, I have referred 2 individuals to the Women and Family Life Center to participate in that guided assistance program.
Great.
In addition, I've been working with Women and Family Life Center, United Way, and Guilford Foundation on the housing diversion program that United Way, the 211 program that
Yes.
United Way has established, and Women and Family Life Center are going to play a critical role in that, so I do appreciate your support of them. I did have a question about lifelinks. I think I had a series of conversations with the executive director at Lifelinks who missed the application filing date. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I was anticipating this.
Yeah.
Mr. Jarvis did not miss the application filing date. He got his application in on time. What he missed was the presentation.
Presentation. That's it.
Right, so our application, I'll just take you through it here. Our application goes up, is live on the Town of Guilford website in August, I think in August, early September, I'm not entirely sure. Anyways, on the application, it says at the top what the dates of the 2 dates that we have for oral presentations. This year it was October 18th and October 25th, I think, 25th. So any applicant who has the application and any applicant who reads the application will know in advance the dates of our oral presentations. We receive all the applications, and then one member of our council contacts each applicant and says, can you come and give your presentation on this day at this time? All right. He was contacted. One member of our council was assigned to him, left him, I don't know the exact number of messages, but it was more than one, left him a message, this is the date. We didn't hear back from him. We tried to confirm, we didn't hear back. The date came, he didn't appear. We called him that day, left a message. We said, we're here waiting for you. He didn't come. The next day, he sent an email to Terry Bergantino, who was the prior chair, saying, hey, I'm here, where's everybody? Terry said, well, your appointment was yesterday, and we've tried to contact you and confirm this. And he said he didn't get any of the messages. When he didn't appear on the appointed day, another member of our council was assigned. Each member of the council shepherds each application through, so we have the contact if we have follow-up questions or anything like that. So one member of the council was assigned to call him and say, give us your presentation over the phone. Since you didn't appear, call me and tell me what you would have told all of us, and I'll convey it to the rest of the council, which he has done before in the past. And she called him a couple of times. He never responded.
Okay.
Then he emailed Terry about would his application still be considered. Terry forwarded the email to me. I said, yes, it would be considered. And I also said, no, I'm sorry, we can't schedule you. And the reason for that, and this is me, I'm the one who made the decision, is we have specific guidelines. This is public money. Once we let somebody
Agreed.
bypass the rules, then anybody can bypass the rules. And I feel that it's extremely important to be completely transparent and to act with utmost integrity when we're dealing with public funds. That means I can't allow an agency, and the council agreed with me. I made sure everybody was on board, that I told him we would consider your application, but we can't just let you come in at another date and time. If we do it for you, we have to do it for anybody. Another example of that is another organization 3 weeks after the deadline was due, asked if they could submit an application. I said, no, we can't let you come 3 weeks later. If we do it for you, we have to do it for everybody.
Agreed.
The same argument was true for Mr. Jarvis.
Good.
And I feel badly about it, but we read his application, and he was considered,
Right.
like everybody else. He just,
Missed the opportunity.
he missed the date, so I knew you were going to ask me this.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was ready for it.
And I appreciate the protocol that you've adhered to. And it's an established protocol.
We have to.
And they know the rules, and they have to live by the consequences of their actions or inactions in this case.
I agree, and we made
That's right.
numerous attempts to contact him, so.
You actually offered an alternative with the telephone opportunity.
Right.
Yes, when, I don't know why he never responded to that either, and like I said, in the past, when he has been unable to make an appointment, a presentation, we did it over the phone. Dee Lundberg did it with him over the phone once.
I do have a general question, if I may.
Sure.
In addition to evaluating the benefit to the community and our residents of all these programs, how do you look at the finances? How do you decide that VNA needs $9,000? What are your procedures?
Well, we look at, for something like the VNA, it's a large organization, obviously, and what they're asking is a small amount of money compared to what their operating budget is, clearly. We try to measure the amount that they ask for with the number of residents served. That is the key indicator. Anybody who comes before our council knows that they have to be providing services to Guilford residents. Otherwise, there's no point in being in front of us. So the VNA obviously is all, has a presence not just in Guilford on the shoreline, but we know when they say we were requesting, what was their request this year?
16.
Right, 16.5. They know they're not going to receive the full 16.5, and it's not as though we can actually do a number crunch. We look at their tax returns, yes, and we look at what's been authorized in the past, and we just sort of think what would be. Basically, it's the number of Guilford residents served. If the numbers go down, then our figure would go down. If the number goes up, then we want to provide them with more funding. It's really, if I have to answer it specifically, it's the number of Guilford residents served. Yeah.
I think in large measure, too, you guys have been constricted by sort of the traditional allotment you've gotten from the town. And you use some judicious in how you spread that out, and you keep it relatively close to previous year's contributions.
We do. We don't like being cut, so if we can, I actually think that this year, because of last year, having to keep our numbers the same as the year before, we were a bit hesitant to even ask for $3,000 more this year, because we really are cognizant that these are town funds and that there are other organizations equally worthy who need town funds too. So we try to keep it in line. We hope we can increase it a little bit every year because we know the need is there. I mean, you read our blurbs, you know the number of residents that are served by all these different agencies. But we also are aware of the facts and being practical.
Any other questions? No, on the board? Very good. Pam, thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for all
Thank
your
you.
work. Good morning. Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Parks and Recreation. We're going to have Rose and Rick. Rose and Rick show.
Gonna get a little R&R right now.
Oh, man,
was waiting.
that's a multi-level
I threw that
fun.
softball. I threw that softball up there for
I didn't
you.
have
Come on.
coffee yet. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good morning.
Good.
Thanks for
Good
listening to us, and glad to see everybody here. So I thought I'd do is just give a couple highlights of a few facts and figures, and then go into some of the budget changes requests. You may know a lot of these things, so if you do, I'm sorry, but I want to repeat a few of the things. We have about 8,000 participants in 600 programs throughout the year. Our participation level with special events is about 20,000 people a year. Fitness classes, 2,500. Day camps, about 1,000. Senior participants, different senior participants, 2,300. Meals for seniors and Meals on Wheels, about 34,000 per year. We take care of 40 athletic fields, mow over 100 acres, do snow removal on over 2 miles of sidewalks, plus all the town parking lots, town buildings. Community center is open between 90 and 95 hours a week. And the number of programs / meetings, uses of this building averages somewhere around 200 a week. So about 200 different groups, counting Parks and Rec programs in this building every week. A few figures, just get out there. I think you know a lot of what our department does, but I think it's important to highlight a few of those. Some of the budget highlights, we have decreases in several accounts. Utilities is about a 2% decrease, or $2,400 less. That was based on projections from Mary Jane, based on what the utility costs will be this year. And that's, of course, heat, water for here, electricity, and then irrigation at Long Hill Park, Jacobs Beach, water at Jacobs Beach. And then our fuel is decreased by 17%, and it's, again, based on what the new fuel costs would be. That's almost $6,000 less. Our building maintenance cost, interestingly, is decreasing this year, and the reason for that is that we have a lot of new HVAC we've been upgrading, thanks to the support that this body's given us the last couple of years. New VAV boxes, which are things that are in the ceiling that control the heat in each room. There are 26 of those, and we've been gradually replacing them. So we think we're going to have less maintenance costs with the HVAC, so the overall cost for maintaining this building, we've dropped a little bit. Grounds maintenance is decreasing by $11,400 or 14%. That's with the assumption, which I'll get into a little more detail in a minute, of us not contracting out trash removal. That's about a $45,000 item that we're taking out of the budget at this point. But in there, we've also added the new office trailer that we have down that we just got a week or so ago for the maintenance guys down at the garage. So there's a rental fee in that, so we put that in the budget. That's something we haven't had before. And including that was the pump out of the bathroom facility there, so we had to add that in there. But still, with that, our decrease is about $11,000 in grounds maintenance. Field maintenance, we're looking for an increase of about 7% or $6,000. And the main driver of that is we're starting to introduce a higher quality clay to the fields. We found that the clay we're using is really more silt. It's 4-to-1 ratio, 4 silt, 1 clay. And ideally, you'd like to see it almost 50-50. So we're getting a higher level clay we're starting to introduce to fields. We're not going to change them all over, or not even try to do it in 1 year. It may be 5, 6, 8 years before we get there. But we did the Bittner A field this past fall, and our plan is to go with the high school field next, the baseball field, the high school, and the softball fields there to start getting this higher clay content built into those fields. The other driver in that is that we're starting to switch over a little bit to some organic fertilizer. We're not making a whole changeover, but we're introducing it again to some of the fields. It's more expensive, but we thought, let's give it a shot. We'll try it and gradually work that in. And there are some soil amendments. Tony's gone to some seminars, and we found there's some amendments that we can add to the soil that help with the uptake of fertilizer and will help overall help us improve the turf quality. And so we're introducing some of those. So that's the reason for the increase in the field account. Pretty much all the rest of our accounts, we have 22 accounts, except for the salaries. All the rest of them are stay the same or a very small increase, a couple $100 here and there. So not really significant. I do want to point out, though, that even with, aside from the part-time and full-time wages, the rest of our budget is decreasing by almost $19,000. So the commission's looked at it real significantly and looked at what can we do to where we're going to save. We cut back in all these areas, and so aside from salaries, we're almost a $90,000 decrease. So salaries. Part-time wages, the increase is mainly because of increases, but we also started this year We increased the hours of the kitchen staff from about 53 to 72 hours a week. And that's something we, we worked on with Mitch and Mary Jane, and Larry just needed help. I mean, like I said, we're 34,000 meals we're pumping out, plus the breakfast that we're having. And the beautiful thing about the breakfast, anybody can come out and have breakfast, not just seniors, anybody, and it's kind of fun to watch when parents are here on Thursday mornings with their kids in gymnastics, and they're having a bagel or coffee or something while their little kids are in the gymnastics, or after gymnastics, the kids come and they get something to eat too. It's funny. One time a kid walked up and said he wanted a hamburger. Well, we're not McDonald's, but that breakfast nets about $18,000 to $20,000 a year, and that helps subsidize the lunches. So that's why you'll see when our senior meals, we kept them in the line at $26,000. We're not asking more money from this board to help subsidize the meals for the seniors. The breakfast does that.
Yeah, Ray, I don't want to quibble with you. You're saying nets. I mean, it produces $18,000 of revenue.
Of revenue.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not backing out the what everybody's getting paid.
No. Just
Okay.
no, just
It has
the food
18,000
costs.
of revenue.
Food costs only. Yeah.
And backing out after the food cost.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so that goes to the food account, and that
Gotcha.
helps. In a sense, it helps subsidize the lunch. It helps to be able to keep the lunch costs down for the seniors. And as I said, we got 34,000. Most of those meals, it's about 75% is Meals on Wheels that are shipped out, and the balance is the meals that are here for the seniors that come here. But I think you all know that the meal program is more than a meal. It's a social program. It's an opportunity for many seniors who are home by themselves that they're here. And I can tell you, there's a handful that come in at about 7:30 in the morning. They're here till 2 in the afternoon, spend the day here. They're home by themselves. And so, again, I know I'm preaching to choir. You all know it's a great program. So we did increase the hours for the help in the kitchen, so they're consistent. It used to be one person was 10 hours, one was 19 and a half, one was 24. They're all 24 now. And it's a big help to Larry having that help there. The full-time account, so the largest impact on this budget is we are asking for an additional full-time maintainer. It's $36,691. And I can give you all the rationale and spend an hour just talking about that, but our guys do a great job. Tony, our park foreman's here, and he can fill in anything in the blanks I may have here, but they work hard. They do the best they can possibly do, but we struggle to keep up and keep the fields in the kind of condition that we want them to be in and that the community is coming to expect. We've gotten some criticism from at least one sports group that the fields aren't where they should be. We don't disagree with that. I think but we do the best we can with what we have. We just don't have the manpower to do it. It seems like we're taking on more and more responsibilities. In fact, here's a sheet that I'm going to pass out that Tony actually came up with, that these are over and above the typical things that we do. The weekly stuff is mowing, 100 and something acres. We could be taking care of up to 12, 14, 15 Little League or baseball fields in a day. Lining all the fields, soccer fields, lacrosse fields. Thank you. So the daily tasks are, weekly tasks are field maintenance. Mowing is daily. Lining is 2 or 3 times a week. And then the clay infields is daily, and there could be 15 of those in a day. And trying to keep up with it is we can't do it. We struggle. What I just handed out is a list of a sample list that Tony put together of many of the other tasks that we do that are over and above those weekly things and daily things that we have to take care of. So what we're proposing is, and those of you who were at our capital budget presentation, we had talked about getting an additional guy, but softening the blow on the budget by taking back the trash removal. It's almost a trade-off. Trash removal, if we contract it out, next year I was told by our current contractor, figure on $45,000. A full-time guy is $36,000. So we already are paying, not counting benefits, I'm just talking out of my budget.
Thank you.
I'm straight on that, I'm not including benefits in that. I understand that. But we also, and I think I passed pictures around last time around, of the issue with the trash company. I'm not trying to throw anybody in a bus. We've had 3 different trash companies, and we haven't been happy with any of them. And trash is left behind. If it drops, they pick it up. The barrel drops, they don't pick it up. It's left there. The barrel's not getting emptied on a regular basis. And I just think we can do a better job. When we did trash removal 8 years ago, we did a much better job than when we contracted it out. We contracted it out because the guys were getting hurt. They were lifting those 55-gallon drums up onto a dump truck, and like this, and they were getting shoulder injuries, back injuries. And that's why with our capital budget, we proposed a trash truck with the arm that can pick the barrel up, so we don't have to worry about the guys getting hurt. And so the bottom line is that if you look apples with apples, not counting benefits, we took the $45,000 out to contract it. A full-time guy is $36,600, and then our estimate for the trash dumping would be about $8,000. So it's almost a wash. It's going to be around $45,000 roughly each. But the advantage is we have that guy or that person working 2 days a week with trash removal. The other 3 days, we have that person helping with all the other things we're trying to catch up with or keep up with. And if I break it down even further by just the trash part of it, it's 2 days' salary, which is about, let's say, $14,700, and then a dump fee, $8,000. If I go just trash to trash, contracting out is $45,000. We are doing it in-house 2 days, and the dump fee is about $22,700. So if I just go trash to trash, that function alone, we're saving a lot of money by doing it ourselves. And then we have that person, the other 3 days, do other things that, as I mentioned, that's all on that list there that we need help with. On top of all this, Tony, our part foreman, is a working foreman. He's doing everything that these guys are doing. He has very little time to supervise because we don't have the guys to do it. He's on the mower, he's lining fields, he's grooming ball fields, he's doing everything that the other guys are doing. So how can he go around and check and see if that job's getting done adequately? He can't. He has no time to do it. So I think that's our biggest highlight of the budget. Again, I think it's an even trade. If this board decides not to give us that person, then we don't need the trash truck. But on the other hand, if we get the trash truck but don't get the guy, we don't want the trash truck because we can't do it. It's all works hand in hand.
Got it.
Yeah. So, but as I said, I think from the trash issue itself. It's break even really. Again, not counting benefits. I'm not putting that in there.
The fees you talk about, we don't take it to the transfer station? Or does that have to go to a separate place?
No, I don't know where, they dump it, with the contractor, you mean? Or if we did ourselves?
If we do it ourselves, you kept including a fee.
We would take it to the transfer station, but we get charged. So we pick up trash now, if we empty a bag or bring it away, because if somebody doesn't get it, the guy, the truck company,
is it
we have to
an
pay.
accounting? The reason the town's getting charged by the town, is that for accounting purposes, to keep track of the transfer station department?
That's contractual with the town of Madison, with the
Yeah,
shared
you have to-
shared facility, so.
So the town of Madison, if they were to dump stuff, they get charged
get charged
also,
as well.
so it's an accounting maneuver more than anything.
With the trash pickup, at one point, we were obligated to meet a certain amount each year.
Quota, right?
Would this help with that quota?
Now the commercial people
I
go
don't
direct.
think I don't think it'll substantially impact the tonnage out of there. I will talk a little bit. I had several complaints throughout the spring and summertime about the trash removal services, particularly on the green. In fact, we started looking at alternative collection bins because they were continually overflowing. We had times where our hauler was not showing up and picking all of them up, and I received several photographs via email from concerned citizens about it. And in particular, there seem to be some issues when we have events that don't fall, are not in alignment with our trash pickup schedule, which is Monday and Friday mornings. And there's very little flexibility with the haulers in terms of doing it. So for instance, on the tree lighting on a Friday night, all right, arguably one of the largest gatherings on the green in the course of a year, that trash does not get picked up until Monday morning. So my question to you is, will you have the flexibility with your staff to be accommodating to the various, timing needs that we have with trash to eliminate some of that problem?
Absolutely. Again, that's, contracting trash, if we were going to contract anything that made sense, as opposed to mowing or something. But again, once you contract stuff out, you lose a lot of control of it. And to your point, Matt, if you call us on Tuesday morning and say, "Gee, there's trash all over the, outside the window or in the green," I get a hold of Tony, we get a guy there, we pick it up.
Right.
With a hauler, you can't do it because, they're scheduled certain days and they may be in another town or somewhere
We
else.
also would
on that
schedule
day.
around events.
Right, exactly.
All right, well, the elephant in the room with trash hauling is workers' compensation. Has been, it's traditionally identified as one of the largest, I want to say, one of the areas where you have the highest number of incidents of workers' compensation. And that is of concern. Taking on an activity that is acknowledged to be have a high incidence of workers' comp cases. That's one of the concerns I have. Now, you did mention that some years ago, we actually had some problems with that because of the collection method.
Right.
Now, does this truck, we're going to be able to take that truck out to the middle of the green? Because there are barrels all over the green. There are barrels in places that you might not be able to get that truck or that arm in. Will you be able to move the location of those barrels to make it accessible so our employees are not out there?
Yes.
And again, the truck would have that arm, the thing that picks up the barrel, so it's not somebody physically is pushing a button.
Okay.
The little ones, the ones you talked about that are on the green and the little metal ones there, those they'd have to pick up, but they're small. They're 35-gallon barrels.
Okay.
Because it's kind of in a cage. The guys have to open a little door, slide it out, and then just pick it up. It's small, it's light.
All right, so the next question is, and I can't recall from the capital discussion, these are special barrels that are going to need to be used. Have we determined what we're going to buy, and is there a cost identified with those barrels? Because those barrels are all going to go away. They're going to go back to the trash hauler.
Right.
So have we identified a cost associated with the purchase of those barrels?
We have. We also are looking, the truck we're looking at, it has different types of arms. One of them can grab onto the old round barrels, and we still have a bunch of those. We just
Okay.
haven't put them out. Tony, what do you have, like 100 of those maybe? The green ones?
We have 60 in our garage, and we gave a bunch to the fairgrounds, so
Okay.
we should probably get a hold of them.
We could probably reuse a lot of those.
Okay.
But I think the ones at the beach, we'd have to, at the beach, we gotta have a cover on them, because the
Right.
seagulls get in there, so we would have to buy some.
Right.
The cost for the large trash barrels is about $75 a barrel.
Okay.
The recycle barrels are a little smaller, and they're, I think, 65.
Right.
And how many barrels would we be looking at?
Well, I think, Tony and I talked about this, I think we can also reduce, right now there are 100,
There's 128, and it would be $9,600
if we bought all of them.
28
Yeah.
of that style barrel to do
Okay.
a complete overhaul.
Right.
And then it would be another about just over $6,000 if we did a complete overhaul of our recycling barrels, which is about at 102. But we both agreed that was numbers initially of what we're doing right now. We think we can cut it down significantly.
And are those numbers represented in the capital budget or anywhere in here at this point?
They're not. We thought we might take them out of another account.
Okay. And the question I have is, are you going to have some excess capacity? Because there are times when we have used the haulers to flex up with putting more barrels on the green for those events. So, 128 is your number. Are you going to need to have some that you can either move around, or
We have.
you have those?
Right.
Right, can I ask you a question? If we have this capability and we have the truck and the arm and you've got a maintainer to go ahead and offer this service to pick up the garbage, is there a way to leverage that or extend that to other parts of the town or even the school where we can say, hey, listen, we can pick up your garbage as well?
Well, good question. And so one of the things is the marina. The marina has a separate, they pay separately right now for the trash removal. And again, it'd be up to the Board of Selectmen if they want to continue that we bill them and they pay us back, or are we just going to take it on? I can just throw this out there. I mentioned at the capital meeting that maybe we talk to Madison, maybe release it to them a couple days a week. See if they'd be interested, or Branford or somebody, and maybe there's a little revenue comes back. Say, look, what are you guys paying for your trash pickup? We want to, for whatever cost, but at least our truck for a couple of days a week and you can use it. So there may be a way to get some revenue back that way too.
Okay, because, I'm just wondering if there's a bigger scale to, try and generate a little bit more in savings, because kind of looking at some of these numbers, if you start to include the cost of the barrels and you include benefits, it's really starting to be more like a wash with the contract and, any potential for savings.
So the purchase of the truck and the purchase of the barrels would be obviously a long-term investment, right? And I think Tony and I figured out too, with the truck purchase, if we amortized it and looked at what we're spending on trash pickup now, that in about 7 to 10 years we will have broken even, including the truck purchase. And we estimate the truck, we should be able to get 20 years out of it. So in 7 to 10 years we break even, and then not that we're making money yet, but we not lose any money after that, if you want to look at it that way. But if you amortize
20
it.
years on a truck,
That's pretty aggressive.
Yeah, well, it's only just a couple
Although
days a
they've
week.
got they got some pickup trucks that are,
Yeah.
Pretty close to that.
I can appreciate it, and you need a backup to make sure it runs that day.
Rick, where was the contractor, the trash contractor's line item?
Where was it? It was in the 202 account, park maintenance.
Ground maintenance.
It's not in there now.
So that's why you're going from 82 to 70?
Yeah, I'll just pull that page out.
Like, it doesn't seem like there's much of a drop.
So the current, the current contract is $33,500.
Okay.
I call, that's been for 4 years, Pam, I think we've been with them. I think it's two-year contracts, I believe we had. So it hasn't,
Did you double check when it expires?
it expires in June.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got half a year and, no, it'll be the new year.
New fiscal year.
Right, new fiscal year. But so, it was $33,500. I asked them, if we continue with you next year, what should we figure? And they said $45,000. Because again, they haven't gone up in 4 years. They're locked in on that contract. So we're using that $45,000 number based on what they had told us. And so you don't see it in here, but if you, in my, I don't know if you guys have a copy of, my budget, but our budget. But we show $33,500 for the trash dump fee. It was the trash collection. And we dropped it down to $8,000, because that would be our cost for the dumping.
But you're looking for that $33,000 decrease.
Forget the
in
45,
line
I'm looking
item.
for the 33.
Right.
Where's that reflected?
That's in, it's not in this year's budget, it's in last year, so we took it out.
Right, so I'm just looking at your.
Page 11.
Yeah, if you look at the detail, just look for line item 55202. You'll see it at the top. It says account 144-55202 grounds maintenance.
Right, and that only went down $12,000. So what Lou's asking is, where's the other 20 grand?
Right, thank you. For
Right?
driving that hammer home.
Okay, but we added in the office trailer rental for almost $9,000.
Right.
That's in.
Oh, I see.
And then the
Offset.
contracted services went from $8,000 to $10,700. That's for the pump out fee for
So
that.
some of the savings is offset by some
By
other.
those other things.
of course.
Yes.
Ah, there's the
Yep.
answer. Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
I have a question unrelated to the trash talk, if we're done with that. And it's about program fees. So the fees you collect from all the program participants, I understand that goes into a separate account.
Right.
Are there any reductions in your line items that you presented to us where funds from the program fees account are being used to offset any of the costs related to those programs?
Yes, there are two areas. One of them, which we actually reduced it last year, so we just did it again this year, the fireworks, $10,000. We took that out last year. We took it out again this year. That's coming out of the program account. And then we had recreation supplies and equipment. We had almost $6,000 that was in there, and that we took that out. So those things we're going to take out of the program fees.
You also mentioned, when we were talking about the capital improvements of the pickleball field and using the program fees towards that, and I think what we're going to start to do is earmark the pickleball fees for the pickleball. It won't pay for the whole thing, but it will start to do that. And the same thing with fields use. As we start to look at our new fee schedule, we're going to earmark that money to go specifically to fields,
Makes sense.
so that things will start to go, rather than just put it in one.
Thank you.
And that should make you feel better.
It does.
Thank you.
On the out-of-town uses of our fields, is that a revenue source for us?
It is. There's not a lot of out-of-town. There are a couple groups that do. And in fact, we have a meeting tonight. The Parks and Rec Commission and Fields Committee had a subcommittee that were reviewing that policy and the fees for about 6 months, maybe 8 months now. And we're presenting that to all the users tonight and let them know this is what our plan is, this is the policy. And I believe at the next Parks and Rec Commission meeting, it's going to be approved. And then we'll implement it starting, I think, probably July 1st. But there is a fee structure now. It's being revised. It's going up for some cases. In-town teams won't be paying, as they never have. They're still not going to pay unless they have maybe a clinic or a camp or something that's outside their regular season. That's the current policy anyway, and we're going to continue that policy. But things like Soccer Fest, where there are a majority of non-resident teams, they've always paid for the use of the fields. Even though it's hosted by a Guilford group, the majority of people playing are not Guilford. And there are a couple other groups that pay 100% of the time whenever they use the fields. So there is some revenue from that.
How would you quantify the fees from out of town?
Well, there's a fee. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
What do we realize each year?
Oh, how much each year? I'm going to guess from one group alone that I'm thinking of right now, on a typical year, about $7,000 between spring and fall. And then there's the other ones, the camps, like I mentioned. It's probably around $8,000-9,000 right now. That'll be more in future years because we're going up on some of those fees.
But again, we're not looking to make money on these. These are, hopefully the fees are going to help us maintain the fields. We're not here to make huge profits.
Right.
We're here to make sure that people go outside and play and use our fields, and we need to promote recreation. So we're trying to keep the fees so that it does not discourage people from using our fields. We don't want to price them out of it.
There are some legal ramifications to turning a profit on the use of public facilities, which it increases our exposure to liability. And there's some very settled case law around that we need to be careful about. Right, Pam?
I start shaking.
She told me that once a couple of months ago. I had to get that back up.
You remembered.
Good point, Matt.
Anything else of Rick or Rose? Mike?
Yeah. In some of our meetings, I think we've been reading in the Board of Ed meeting notes about the Cox Fields and the transfer of Cox Fields over to the town from the Board of Ed. Can you discuss that a little bit and any cost impact?
So, I don't anticipate any cost. I don't know if from the transfer, I don't know if there's any, but the reason we have suggested that is that, as you know, we put a lot of money into renovating those fields a couple of years ago, put irrigation up there. But because it's school property, the way we manage it and the use of herbicides basically is the issue. You can't use it on school grounds. It's a law. We can use it in high school, but you can't use it 8th grade and younger. But in conversation I had with Dr. Freeman and Cliff Gurnham and others, they said that the school kids, they never ever use those 2 upper fields. We use sports, but not the school. School does not use it. And so we started talking to the field committee and the Parks and Rec Commission. Well, why don't we? Why not it be a park as opposed to school? Because if it's a park, you can use crabgrass control, for example, grub control. You can't use on school grounds. And so, we have quite an issue with weeds up there now, and they're overtaking the field, and we can't do anything. We can't treat them. But if it's a park, you can. And so that's really the impetus for it. We can our turf management plan can be different in a park versus on school grounds. And if that's not school grounds, we can
Be a little more
implement
aggressive.
the same way we do Bittner and some of the other fields. That's the main driver for it. I think in a meeting that I was at, one of the members of the Board of Education just suggested, well, maybe we should pay for the water up there. I don't know if that's happening yet, if he's talked to you, Matt, or what, but I did have a conversation with Cliff Gurnham about that. I believe he's still putting in his budget, at least for this year, but maybe long-term we put it in. My guess on the water, based on what we pay at Long Hill, it could be, well, if we have a year like this year, it's a couple $1,000 because we have so much rain. But on a dry year, it could be $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 for irrigation. But again, that's not in this year's budget. Cliff is keeping it in his budget for this year. That would, to my knowledge, that's the only extra cost, other than maybe
just the
getting
extra
Dimension
maintenance.
for Dimension is a product we put out for crabgrass control, and it's, I don't know, Tony, what's it? $20 a bag or something?
It's like $18.
Yeah. So not a huge cost, but it can help us better maintain those fields.
But right now, Park and Rec is maintaining all the fields at Cox, correct?
We maintain all the fields in town, everything.
Right.
Yeah.
So all that would change is the maintenance of the upper fields.
Correct.
You do two maintenance programs, one for the lower fields that
Correct.
the kids are using, and one,
Right.
or the school remains school property. Kids are using the upper fields too, but those same rules don't apply with regard to the maintenance because it's now town-owned, correct?
Okay.
And if I could just add, I want to do a little more legal research on that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just initiating an idea. We don't know where it's going to go, but we just thought it made some sense for us to be able to do that. And we did talk to DEP about it. We told them the situation, the layout. They actually Google mapped it, and they looked at it, and they said the DEP is who governs the use of herbicides and pesticides, and they saw no restriction to consider that to be a town property as opposed to school. And that came directly from I forgot her name, Dawn, something at DEP.
One of the concerns I had was the only access to that field is across the school grounds today. So could you be transporting on the bottom of cleats, sneakers, shoes, et cetera, any of those materials back onto the school property itself, thereby theoretically violating the state requirement about not having those pesticides on school grounds? Now, there's some talk about how quickly that stuff dissipates. One rainstorm, it dissipates, it's not there. But I think you still have the possibility, which is why I had asked for the conversation with DEEP. I think we also have to talk to the State Department of Education, who probably was the promulgator of that law. Because I don't want this to look like we're just skirting the rules based on adjacency. And I think this needs to see the full light of daylight relative to the community knowing what we're attempting to do here. So, no doubt, the improvement to that field is something that we are looking for. Question: is the high school girls still practicing up there? Do they still practice up there?
Yeah.
Okay. So the distinction is high school athletes are allowed to practice on fields where those types of materials are applied, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and we can use those products on all those fields at the high school.
Okay. Other questions? Comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Two years in a row. Where's the Spock? Was there a minute? He was here, that's right. He might be just back up. I can't. Good morning. Good morning, Chief and Commissioner Bickler. How are you?
Good. Park and Rec soften you up?
Little bit.
Yeah.
Little bit. Okay, you've been through this drill a couple of times.
Yeah. Grab some.
Both of you, in fact.
Yes. Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Appreciate it. I know you guys have received our proposed budget. There's a couple of things I wanted to point out as we progress through. When the police commission reviewed the budget, just in advance of this, and I don't know whether it's come up before, the police commission approved it at a 3.9% with a $188,721 increase. And the discrepancy between what you're looking at and that is the civilian salaries for 18-19. They went in, what you're looking at was the adopted budget, and I used the actuals because there had been some contracts for GEA that weren't completed. So I took the number just by way of, if you have both sheets, if you have ours and theirs, I just wanted to point out the difference between the two. And so that difference, which is, although it's relatively minor, about $5,300, it switched it from a 4.1 to a 3.9 on our side. So I just wanted to point that out going in.
Okay.
The majority of our increases, as you can see, are all contractually related to salary items, both on the police salary side is the largest part, and then obviously in our overtime and replacement. Now, having done this a few times, I've learned my lesson, and I'm hoping that you got our explanation, our written explanation of training, overtime, and replacement, because I know I get that question, and I'm happy to discuss that again.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd kind of beat you to the punch this year, but I'm happy to discuss that and explain how we got to the numbers we did. We looked really closely with the staff and with the commission at starting from scratch, zero base, and trying to get as low as we can. I think you can see from the non-salaried side where we dropped 3.8%, a total of $22,718. It offset a lot of the increases you're seeing as a result of contractual salary and replacement and overtime costs. I can go down each line item if you like, or I can entertain questions about the overall budget itself. But the bottom line is really we're looking for that $188,721 increase, and based on our numbers at a 3.9.
Right. Chief, thank you very much for the explanation on the distinction between overtime and et cetera.
Sure.
The question I think that comes to mind is we have basically the same staffing complement that we've had for a couple of years, all right? So why are there significant increases in replacement salaries, overtime? We can understand traditional salaries, but given this, that you have the same staffing complement, why the increase in those areas?
Well, it's easily answered. I'll start with the overtime. Overtime, as explained in that sheet that I provided for you, and I'll add it for the public who's listening.
Exactly.
Overtime is essentially unanticipated police needs. So let's say, for example, an officer is working from 7 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and at 2:50 they go to a domestic complaint. They end up there investigating, making an arrest, and processing that arrest. They remain past their 3 o'clock shift and are paid overtime for that cost. Overtime also covers unanticipated events. We had a substantial number of major investigations last year. When we have investigations like that, whether it's a fatal motor vehicle crash or a couple of the other incidents we had last year, you have to call in extra bodies to do those investigations while the remainder of the staff stays on to cover the normal calls, because the normal calls don't stop when the big ones come in. And so from an overtime perspective, that's one of those items that is completely unpredictable. We could have nothing all year, which, knock on wood, would be great, or we could have a bunch of events that increase our overtime expenditures substantially. And when we calculate overtime and replacement, as you know, we take a 3-year average over the last 3 completed budgets, identify the percentage of the actual salaries that those drew against, and then project that percentage against this year's proposed salary, and that's how we get those numbers. So moving on to replacement, the question is, how can you have, we have had the same amount of staff for the last couple of years, yet the replacement is high. Throughout this last fiscal year and the year before, and I explained this last year, right now if you look at our staffing, we're at 100%. That's 100% people employed. However, Since last coming on a year, we've had a supervisor that's been out injured from a work-related injury coming on close to a year. Every time that person is supposed to be working, where they don't have their other supervisor working, we have to replace them. We've had another officer who was injured, and he's been out going on more than a year now as well. That's 2. We have 2 officers that have been in training since last, I think it's October. They were unfilled up until October. We hired them. They've been at the academy. They graduate in March. They won't be on the road themselves until June. So we've been, at times during this last fiscal year and the year before, between 7 and 9 officers down, although the staffing is at full staff. So you have to take into consideration all those costs that come with that. I'm very hopeful and optimistic, and everyone tells me to keep quiet when I bring this up, that we're in a good place now. As of June, we're projected to be fully staffed -1 for an officer that's still injured and not trained. So that's 1 is a big difference than a big difference between 1 and 9, and that's reflected in the requirement to replace all those people on the shifts that we've projected they would be working. So I don't know if that explains it, but it's again, some of that stuff is unpredictable because of officer injuries and retirements. We try to project out what we think is going to happen in the coming year. There's several officers that are eligible for retirement. We have no indication yet that they're leaving, but that could happen tomorrow. We don't know.
Well, but a retirement creates pressure on your overtime account, because if you're hiring a new officer, you're sending them up to the training academy, and you have to replace that person
In prior years,
while they're gone.
as we've discussed, it takes at least 10 months. We've looked at laterals. It's been a challenge. It's been something every time that we put a position out, we try to look at, because that would speed up the process. But the reality is we end up with an officer from scratch, and it's 10 months from start to finish, as the chief was alluding to.
Fully staffed means staff, for your projection for this year is fully staffed and on the street here in town, not in training. We're close to that.
My projection is fully staffed and on the street -1.
Okay.
So although we're fully staffed, there's an officer that's injured that I'm not sure what their return time is. So I'm hoping by June we're only 1 down. So
Your overtime is going to suggest an increase every year. Where is it going in this year? You had 576 and 1516, 585 the next year, and 687 in this past year.
right. So the
So
6
that
8
shows a steady increase in the overtime.
It does. The overtime, as you know, is tied into the police salary as well. So when the police salary goes up, the overtime is going to go up. So in the first couple of years that you alluded to, the 576, the 585, that's kind of a normal, consistent jump with the salaries. We had a really tough year last year with case investigations, and it really overexpended. So you saw that 687, which brought the 3-year average into a 617 from when you worked it into those prior years. So traditionally, that 575 range, 585 range is where we're at as compared to total salary.
But this year, you're asking...
This year, we're asking for 6.17, correct. And again, based on the averages of the last 3. It's the formula we've used. It's tended to be very accurate. Last year was an anomaly, and I'm hoping that
This should cover the anomaly.
Yeah.
I think I learned from last year that you are following a consistent formula.
Right.
You know,
Have you had much?
I have a non-overtime related question, and it's not that big of a deal, but, so this year you have, under communications and electronics, 15,300. I saw that you're already 3,400 over for this year, and you lowered it for next year, so I'm wondering, did you purchase everything that you need? Do you anticipate there being less cost next year?
I anticipate less cost. There's a lot of portable radios that we've been replacing to get up to digital status. A lot of the radios that we've had over the last years were analog and not digital, so we've been replacing them rather than buy a whole bunch at once.
Okay.
We've been buying a few each year, and as we get into next year, we're not going to need as many. There's also, on the over expenditure, I've been working with our admin. We have, something was double encumbered, so we're looking to get rid of that. So it was purchased and then double encumbered, so we're looking to get that number cleared up in the in the budget for the current year.
I'm sorry, I'm still a little confused on the replacement salary.
Sure.
Why is this year's, basically it went from 400 for the prior 2 years down to 338, I think it is, for the current year we're in, for the budget, and then now it's back up to 392 for next year, but given what you talked about with the officers being out, I'm surprised I'm looking to see where you are relative to this year's budget. But you went down by 60 basically, and then you're back up. So why did you go down so much this year in the budget?
Again,
and now are you on track for that number?
We're basing
Am I
it
looking at the
again
wrong
on the 3-year averages. So when you look at how high we were in the completed budget year of 17-18 at 13.3, with the prior years of 10.15 and 12.9. From a percentage perspective, going down to that 12 is just a reflection of the formula that we're using. And it's kind of sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But over the long term, if we go away from that formula, we're playing a complete guessing game. And this is the approach we've taken. So the number as it drops is just a reflection of the formula applied to that current salary.
And I'm guilty, and the chief was complicit with it last year when we were looking for budget cuts. That's one of the line items we went to. We discarded the traditional 3-year rolling average, and the chief agreed to take a cut on that replacement salaries. As of today, or as of through December, I'm sorry, you're right at 49.5% expended on that replacement salary
Right on the
account.
money.
You're right on the money. So let's hope it stays that way.
I'm actually hoping it goes down.
So the 338 number that I see in there is based on the percentages. The percentage number it's consistent basically, even though it went down by 60 and then it's back up.
Right, the percentages, if you're referring to of total salary.
Total salary.
Right.
Yeah, so the percentages vary, again, from, 2015-16 at 10.1, all the way up to a 13.3 in 17-18. And so when it averages out, that's where you see the drop. So you have a higher number in 17-18, but when you average it out, it's dropping down a small amount. I'm not sure
and
if
I
I'm
guess the
getting
one
to-
that's missing in there is the 18-19, which is the
Right.
period
Right.
we're in, where the
Right.
number, where the actual budgeted number went down by quite a lot, which is what.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, we didn't use an actual, nor the projected.
You cut that
We
number got
that.
cut down, so we didn't use this.
Yes,
That's my cut.
exactly.
Right, and next year you'll see that in the formula. 15-16 will drop out, and you'll see that number in there. Because I would be, again, we're going on, the completed years is the only actuals that I have, so.
Somebody's knee keeps getting.
Yeah, it's me.
Is that you?
Yeah. It's my toe, not my knee. Better.
Other questions?
Are you losing many officers to other towns? Is there much turnover in that regard?
We've lost several in the past couple of years. It's not, we're not bleeding people. And I think that's, the reason we're losing them varies among, sometimes it's geographic. People have family in a different area and they want to move. Sometimes it's contractually related because they want to go to an agency with a defined benefit plan as opposed to a defined contribution. There's nothing we can do about that other than change it, but it's not crazy numbers, but every 1 or 2 that we lose makes a difference, and as you can see how long it takes to get us back up to speed. But some of the ones we've lost over the last few years, there's been a lot of retirements, and it was a projected, we knew that in the last few years we were going to lose a lot of people. We've actually hired in the last 3.5 years 17 officers.
Half the force.
Yeah, that's half the force, and that takes a lot of time to catch back up, and I'm hopeful that we've gotten there. As you can see, most of you see a lot of new faces around. You probably, all the faces that you used to recognize. There's a lot of new people out there. So.
You mean a lot of the guys you started with?
Yeah. There's only one left that's been there longer than me.
Do many of them live in town, just out of curiosity?
Some of them do.
Yeah.
Some of them live close by, North Branford's and Clinton's, and some go a little farther out. But
Is there a requirement for a call-in time that they have to live in, a radius?
there's, you have to live, to be hired, you have to live within 20 miles of town. Yeah. So, some places don't have that requirement. It's, we find it pretty helpful, because if you do need to call someone in, they'll get there in a reasonable time.
Chief, we've talked to the other departments, they've highlighted utilities. You're dropping about $17,000 in the utilities line item.
It's great, isn't it?
It's great, exactly. And one of the reasons we need to highlight this is because, as the board will see, there'll be about a $90,000 charge associated, a line item in this year's budget associated with the lease payments for the energy performance contract. So we're sort of trying to highlight where the energy savings are coming from. So is this?
Well, it's a combination of that and also a transfer of our modem costs. We have monthly modem costs that were in there last year, and cell phone costs.
Yep.
And communications has agreed to take those costs in, because it, as you've seen over the last few years, different departments, it doesn't make sense for each department to have their own separate communications and cell phone contracts. So Chief Hershaft in the communications budget has agreed it makes more sense to have it all consolidated to realize a little bit more savings, economies of scale type of things that make it better for us. So we win. It's showing up somewhere else in the budgets when we talk to them. So I appreciate them doing that, but it did reflect a significant drop for us. And then the projections on electrical use has dropped, and our gasoline, that's a different item, but again, that number went down a little bit. So.
Good. Anything else?
Yeah, is that gasoline number actually, is that based on more efficient vehicles or prices?
Price.
Been about.
It went down a little bit, and our projection, we were actually within about 200 gallons of our projected usage last year, so it was pretty good.
That's nice.
Yeah. So it's really just a slight drop in
the price.
Okay.
Have you run into any issues with expenses for data storage for the cameras or anything like that?
We're in the middle of that right now. Issues? No, not necessarily, because we anticipated. So we have vehicle cameras that store a lot of data. It takes up a lot of space to store all that. And we have retention requirements through the state for how long we need to store these things. We just actually completed within the last couple of weeks a purge of a lot of that data based on some changes in our retention requirements. So we freed up a bunch of space for our car cameras. We're in the middle of evaluating the body camera systems that are going to be brought online within a year. That's going to require, again, a huge amount of storage, but we budgeted for a server to do that. We've determined that the server-based storage on this is a lot cheaper than the cloud-based stuff. Some of the vendors are really killing you on cloud-based storage, and I've been reading articles recently that some departments are actually stopping their body camera programs because of the storage costs. So our anticipated storage needs are going to be met with the servers that we have budgeted right now, but we'll have to see.
Great.
Chief, is there any need that you see in terms of safety for your personnel, either that you've reflected in the budget or that you maybe didn't feel that you could put in?
I will say this, the town, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance has always been really good about making sure that we get what we need from an officer safety perspective. If I thought it needed to be in there, I didn't withhold it. And again, I appreciate that, and I know the officers do. From an equipment perspective and a training perspective, those are the most important things. And if I thought we needed it and the commission thought we needed it, it would be in there. There's nothing in there that's going to compromise or delay any sort of safety issues that we might have. But thank you for asking that.
Can you talk about the new, and probably in a generalized way, about the new app that the schools are using? If you see something, say something. Is there going to be, do you anticipate a additional resources needed for your department utilizing that?
No, nothing at all. It's,
And you can
as some of
incorporate it
you,
all?
yeah, some of you may know, that rolled out about a week ago. And as expected from the vendor, the Sandy Hook Promise See Something, Say Something app, which was presented to the middle school and high school students, they said you're going to see an initial uptick in calls, which we did. But the only thing this does that we weren't doing before is it provides a new way for people to report things they're concerned about. Our staff is fully prepared and quite capable of handling the increase in calls. It wasn't a ridiculous increase in calls. It was a larger number of concerned calls about certain students and what was going on, and we responded to those with the schools appropriately and effectively. And I don't anticipate any hardware, software, or manpower costs that are going to increase as a result of that. I just see an increased value to the town and the students in the ability to anonymously report something that they might not have otherwise reported before. So no anticipated increases there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Okay,
Ellen?
thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Yeah. We'll do a 5-minute health break to go to the order.
Sounds good.
I gotta heat my coffee up.
And we're back live. Well, maybe not live for those viewing us, but here we are. Next up, Town Properties. Steve, come on up.
Are you looking for another job? Full-time job?
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Very well, thanks. This year, full-time salaries as well as part-time salaries are per the GEA contract. Overtime will remain the same at $3,000. Stipends, actually I should have changed that because we have somebody doing some schooling right now, but I put it in at 0. Travel expenses will remain the same. Utilities have gone up a little. I have taken over electricity at 11 Water Street, which is the lighting at the new parking lot.
Right.
I've taken over the car charging electrical,
Yeah.
as well as 52 Church Street. So that is the change there.
We should be disabling. When are we going to be able to
I have
disable
not,
electricity?
I can do it anytime. I'm just
Okay.
waiting for somebody to give me the go-ahead.
All right. Well, that may happen shortly.
Telephone, cell phones has gone down a little. Street lighting has gone up. I think electrical costs have gone up 3%, according to the power company, so that explains that. Hopefully that will be less because as we install LEDs and all the street lighting,
Yep.
but I have no way of knowing
How
offhand.
far along is that
I
transition?
think they're supposed to start in February.
And is that part of the energy?
That's part of the
shift?
Johnson Control energy efficiency.
So right now, we have traditional street lighting?
Yes, we still do.
And
Nothing
it's
has
gonna go
changed
to
yet.
LED?
Right.
And the budget reflects status quo at this point, because we
Good.
don't know what
Because
the
we have-
reduction will be.
No, great, thanks.
Fire hydrant rental has gone up. A lot of that is, I think, due to the WICA charge, which we have no control over.
That's awesome, that number.
Yes. Cemetery maintenance remains the same. Uniform and clothing allowances per the GEA contract. Repairs and maintenance has gone up about $5,000. That is due to, it's the 5-year, we have to rebuild all the sprinkler valves, dry, wet valves in all the buildings. So that's reflecting the extra charge for that. Maintenance supplies, that's gone up a little due to the cost of materials and whatnot. Seasonal decorations will remain the same, and vehicle maintenance is remaining the same. Any questions on anything? Maintenance supplies have gone up mostly because of cleaning supplies. They've gone up, I don't know, 5-7% lately.
Okay. So 2/3 of your increase is that fire hydrant rental?
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Something I.
And that's just a number imposed from?
That's what they gave
on
us.
high.
That's what, correct.
Correct, that's an estimate from them on where next year will be, but it's been a consistent increase since I've been here at least.
And is that, it's regulated presumably, that has to get approved by some...
Public Utility Regulatory Authority.
Okay.
Yep, that rate case was settled this past summer.
They had a hearing about it.
Yep.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions, Steve? One question. When do you think the elevator will be ready?
They said 5 days. Today is day 3.
Right.
So I'm hoping Friday, Monday, and then we got to get the state in.
Okay.
They just gave me an additional list of things that the state inspector's going to look for.
Okay.
Some will be done today, some will be done Thursday. I think the last of my part will be done Friday, so I'll be done with my stuff before
Okay.
they're done.
Right.
So I'm hoping,
And the water and pump, the water and the...
is all working fabulously.
Perfect. Good.
Steve, not like I'm looking to spend more money, more town citizens' money, but repairs and maintenance, you're responsible for a lot of little odds and ends of buildings and keeping things going and not letting things fall behind so that it then costs us more. So do you have enough in that line to do what you need to do?
I mean, in the perfect world, I'd love to have more, but part of building maintenance, most of the bigger buildings have their own building maintenance fund. So I usually try to talk to them as to what to add for, or what to plan on for the oncoming budget. So some of it is carried in other departments. Question?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I'm curious, it sounds like, is there a schedule of periodic maintenance? I mean, is there like in one place that you have what needs to be done where and when?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the one in charge of hiring all the HVAC contractors for everybody and stuff.
Okay.
So, I mean, everybody is, for the most part, sprinklers are all hired through me.
Yeah.
So I have control over where they're going and what they're doing.
Okay. Okay. I'd be interested in if you already are keeping that data, I'd be interested to see a report on what it is that gets done and when it gets done.
Okay.
If it's not too much trouble. Okay.
I'll have my staff work on it.
Mary Jane, help.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Engineering. Good morning, Janice.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. Okay.
All yours. The floor is yours.
Walk you through the different line items for the engineering department budget. As you can see, the full-time salaries, those are based on the 3 employees in the department at this time. And that's the contracted salary costs. We're not budgeting any overtime. Expenses and travel, we're holding the same at $250. Uniform and clothing allowance, $300 is by contract for the assistant town engineer's position. One item that's gone up quite a bit, as you can see, is the contracted services item. And I've kind of broken down. We're in the MS4 permit at this time, and we're getting into a stage where we need to start doing our stormwater testing program, which requires dry weather testing as well as wet weather testing in all impaired water areas in town. My assistant, who's been on board for a month, and I've been here for 6 months, we've been reviewing the permit and the plan that's in place by the engineering department. From what we can see, it looks like that we're anticipating about 200 locations in town that we may have to be testing, and we're trying to fine-tune that. And because the impaired waters we're having to test have bacterial impairment, that's a test that has to be done by a certified lab. It's not anything we can do with like some sort of litmus tests or anything staff can do themselves. So I have not contracted because I haven't established the scope of work yet for this work to be done, but I want to allow for a sizable amount of money to at least get started on the program. Once we get into it a little further, we'll better understand the costs of the testing.
Is that something that just needs to happen periodically? Or is it something new? Like, why all of a sudden $15,000 as opposed to
So there's a new...
every year we're going to spend $6,000?
Well, there's a new stormwater permit that the town is operating under. It came into play a couple years ago, and we're in a phase now of the plan and the permit that requires testing. In the past, under the old permit that I think was dated back to about 2005, 2004, you only had to pick 6 locations in town and test once a year. Okay. Instead, now they're focusing on the areas that are impaired water bodies, which all of Long Island Sound is impaired, and then we have a couple sections of the East River and the West River and a little bit of the, a little section up north. I forgot what water body that is exactly. So any discharges to those areas the state is requiring like a blanket screening and a baseline be established through wet weather testing and then dry weather testing to really understand where these contaminants are coming from. So it's been discussed for many years. The permit was delayed for a few years because there was a lot of pushback because of these perceived costs that we were going to have, and we're starting to see them come to fruition. To be in compliance with this permit includes catch basin cleaning, which we've been doing for many years, even under the old permit. But this testing requirement and some of the increased in street sweeping, we're going to start getting into analysis of our impervious pavement across the town and trying to come up with ways to decrease the impervious pavement. So it's a big undertaking with this new permit that's been put in place by DEEP.
So is that $15,000 likely to repeat in future years? Or is that like, I'm trying to get at, is that a one-time bump to come up to speed and then it'll drop off, or?
I honestly don't know until we get into the testing to understand how much testing we're going to have to continue to do going forward because we haven't established those baselines yet. So in order to be, and this really is kind of a best guess at this point from me as to what it's going to involve because we're just getting into defining the scope of what we need to test, and we haven't reached out yet to get pricing on what that's going to cost. So
this is an entirely new program?
It's a new permit. We've been under a permit for stormwater since 2004, 2005, but the new permit was updated a couple years ago, and it has all these further new requirements.
And is this the first time we're addressing this, or have we been addressing it before this?
We have been doing the prior stormwater testing for the town, which, as I said earlier, was like 6 locations in town that you test once a year, in addition to our 2 industrial permits, one for the transfer station and one for the public works. They require annual testing as well. Those will continue under the industrial permits, and those permits are likely to change in the future as well, but currently we're still operating under those old permits. We're now operating under this new municipal stormwater permit, which is called the MS4, and these testing requirements are more broad and require you establish baselines and then determine where you need to do your future concentrated testing once you've established your baselines. So I'm just trying to fund.
Reliable estimate.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to start funding so we could start establishing our baselines, and you know, I'll certainly update you as to the status and where I see the cost of this going once we kind of get into it a little further.
Once the baselines are established, will the number of locations that they require testing would increase? Based on results.
We hope.
Okay.
You know, we hope that we're going to find that there aren't problems in certain locations and may not have to test going forward. But again, it's all new uncharted territory for us and most towns. We are fortunate that the state of Connecticut Yukon Extension Program has been aiding the towns in trying to stay in compliance with this permit and kind of letting us know what we need to do, when, and how to proceed, and providing avenues to try and crowdsource, procurement for some of these services, and giving some hints on how to. We're preparing our plan right now. It needs to be published for the public to review and then submitted to DEEP. So they've been helpful in aiding the towns and staying compliant with this permit, but it is kind of new uncharted territories for most of the towns.
It's not Guilford specific necessarily,
It's every municipality in the state of Connecticut, and we're considered an urban area because we have a high enough concentration in certain areas. Part of our town isn't really of concern because it doesn't have the impaired waters, but the parts that do, we have to do all this testing as well as other reporting and.
And what are you discovering in your communication with your colleagues in other towns? Are they more or less on the same page?
Yes, it was actually, there were a lot of hearings at the state level. CCM was involved, a lot of the elected officials were involved, kind of really trying to delay the implementation of this permit or to make it more reasonable for towns to be able to comply with, because it is a bit of a challenge, not only from a staffing and work effort point of view, but also now you're starting to see the costs come into play.
What sort of problems are they looking for? Like solvents, sediment, or all of the above?
All of the above. You look at turbidity, you look at contamination of any sort. Like I said, in our area particularly, it seems to be a bacterial type of contaminant that we're looking at based on the testing that had been done under the previous permit. So what they basically did under the previous permit is we were reporting our results, and the state was taking all those results and then analyzing them to determine kind of where the problems are in the state with contaminants to our water bodies. So as you know, we just recently passed the illicit discharge ordinance. That's part of the plan in order to protect the stormwater discharges, which ultimately protect the water bodies, whether it's rivers, streams, Long Island Sound. And keep in mind, all this kind of starts at the top. It starts at EPA level. There's a determination this needs to be done, and then it's pushed down to the state level to manage it, and then it's in this state, it's pushed down to the local level.
Janice, will the consultant help you identify the sites to test, or are you doing that yourself?
We're doing, some of the work was done by the engineering department, identified locations. The assistant engineer is currently reviewing those locations to make sure that they're complete, so that then we can establish where we need to start testing and put out RFQs and proceed with that. We're doing most of the work in-house in terms of compliance with the permit, and working with the Yukon Extension Program to provide us answers to questions we may have and help us understand what we need to do when, if we have any questions, and then we'll have to procure like testing services to do the testing.
As Janice mentioned, we're at the bottom of the hill, and there's an old axiom about something flowing downhill, and we're the catch basin for these regulations, not to use the term, but CCM had successfully fought the implementation of this for a number of years through the legislative lobbying, because this is another unfunded mandate in terms of the cost, not only to staff time, but the cost of these testing and so forth. However, one thing, we have to balance that. We are a coastal community, and so there is, I think there's some protected self-interest for us to be able to protect one of our most valuable resources. So it's sort of, we come at that from both sides. Okay.
The next item is the hazardous waste disposal line item. That's going up significantly based on my attendance at the Haz Waste Central. We're a member community of that, and they're anticipating our participation to increase. I think we budgeted about $22,000 last year, and they're budgeting us for about $34,500 in participation by the townspeople in the program.
Janice, is that reflective of the fact that we closed the hazardous waste collection here in town?
Yeah, the fact that we're not collecting the waste oil and hydraulic fluid at the transfer station seemed to indicate an uptick in use of the Haz Waste Central option for residents to dispose of their waste oil there instead of at our town facility at the transfer station.
If you could just for a minute, your predecessor was the one that came to the Board of Selectmen and recommended that we close that because of some potential liabilities with contaminants. And I've had conversations with some folks in the community about that. Could you just summarize for a minute why we are no longer collecting there, what the risk is to the town.
So in the industry, there's been an issue with PCB contamination with waste oil. And we had one instance, so the vendors who pick up the waste oil are testing as they pick it up to make sure that they don't end up with a contaminated load at their ultimate discharge location. So evidently at one of the pickups at our facility here in town, they did find PCBs in the tank, and so I believe we were charged. I haven't investigated the expense to the town at the time, but it was an expense to the town, so that then that contaminated load could then be properly disposed of because it contained PCBs. So it was decided at the town, since we don't have measures in place to test every person who comes in with their load for PCBs and all that with the staffing and things available, that it would be best to just have residents utilize the Has Waste Central Disposal. Having attended a couple of their meetings so far since I've been here, they too had one load even coming out of their facility that tested positive, and it was a cost to them to have properly disposed of with the contaminant of PCBs. So it's an industry-wide issue, and I've been looking into different options, but it pretty much comes down to you're going to have to either have 2 tanks and tests and then deal with those limited quantities of potentially contaminated waste oil if you find it to be positive, or as was decided by the prior town engineer and I guess the board of selectmen, it was just easiest to just advise people to use the resource that we pay to be involved with the Has Waste Central Disposal. And keep in mind they operate from May to October, and so they're open on Saturdays in New Haven, and they usually have, I think, 1 or 2 satellite locations in Madison every year. And so it basically is a slight inconvenience, but it's, if you're going to be doing your own oil changes at home, and then you just hold it until the facility's open and you could take it down to be disposed of in New Haven instead of at our transfer station. I think we're providing the service to the residents without taking on the liability of managing it locally.
Thank you.
And then the next item is the copier lease and supplies. I've increased that slightly because there may be a new contract coming up for a large format copier, which I'm not exactly sure what that was, but basically the engineering department funds all of town hall sales, copier and printing in the building. So this covers all the departments in town hall south, the centralized copier and scanner, as well as large format plotter and scanner that we utilize for the mapping and things like that we handle in the town hall south. Office supplies holding steady at $1,000. Minor tools, we're budgeting for $500 holding steady in case we have any equipment needs for work out in the field. Road striping and signs. This item kind of got split between engineering and public works when the departments were divided, and I've increased it slightly because I've noticed, particularly in the center of town, that there are a number of crosswalks, parking stripes, and things that really do need to be refreshed. So utilizing this year's budget and next year's budget, an effort will be made to have a lot of that restriped. And keeping in mind, too, we have the Water Street parking lot as well is also in need of refreshing, and some of that has yet to be worked out who's paying for what, but I'm sure we have a portion of that to pay. So permits, dues, and subscriptions is broken down there, pretty much holding steady with last year's. Education and training, again for staff training and education that we may come across, seminars and things like that keep us current to some of these things like MS4 permits and the like. And then vehicle maintenance, I've increased that slightly given the age of the one vehicle we're currently sharing. I'm a little concerned that we'll make it through this year even, but so far holding good. But overall, you're going to see a reduction in the cost for the department, given we have all new staffing in the department.
Questions? I've asked mine. Pretty clean. You good? Mm-hmm. Thank you, Janice.
Okay, thank you.
Well, well done. Ready? Public Works. Come on up. Welcome. Chairman Larkins? Oh, yeah. How are you? Good. Okay. Gonna.